it's Reagan and welcome to my July wrap up. Now for the month of July, I am actually super pleased with the amount of books I was able to read. I completed 6 total books and I'm honestly almost all the way through 2 additional books. So again, really pleased. I had a very strong month. The Reading Rush Readathon definitely helped me a lot, and I don't know, hopefully I can carry on the momentum into August. But without further ado, let's go ahead and chat about the books I've read. The first book I'm going to talk about is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is an incredibly popular book and one that was on my TBR for a very long time. I'm happy to say I read it this month and absolutely loved it. This is a story basically about a very famous Hollywood starlet recounting her entire life to a reporter and writer, and we're kind of flashing forward and back in time between present day and the writing experience between Evelyn Hugo and the biographer, and then we also go back in time and feel present within Evelyn's life. Evelyn Hugo is an incredibly famous figure within this Hollywood world, and she has very notoriously had 7 husbands, and this book is written in a way where each husband is kind of the parameters of a different chapter of her life. This is such a great book. One, Evelyn Hugo felt so real to me. So many moments while reading this I wanted to stop and Google one of the moments that was described in this novel, either a red carpet dress or a movie that came out. I wanted to watch the things that she was in. But of course, Evelyn Hugo is an entirely fictional character. This story also has so many emotional ups and downs. Evelyn Hugo is a really complex and dynamic character, which again is why she feels so tangible, but there's romance, there's loss. This is also an LGBTQ plus story. There are multiple characters in this story that identify as either bisexual or gay, and they really talk about that within the context of old Hollywood. You kind of see the glitz and glamour of that particular time period, but also all of the horrible things that were happening behind the scenes, sexism, the mistrust, and honestly all the hoops that people had to jump through just to be with the people that they loved. Again, an incredible story, absolutely captivating. You'll fly through this if you have not already picked it up, which I feel like the last person on the planet to have read this book, but it was just so enchanting from page 1. Funny, I laughed, I cried, I really felt all the things with these characters. I'm so happy I finally read this book. Definitely 5 out of 5 stars. From there, I completed City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the first book to a trilogy that Robert Jackson, I think it's the Divine Cities trilogy, and this has to be one of the most unique and interesting fantasy novels I've read in a really long time. This is a story that's set in a world where divine beings once existed. In the land that they ruled, the people that lived there were incredibly powerful because they obviously had the power of the gods on their side. These cities were constructed and ruled by miracles, and they just basically were able to reach their power beyond their borders, and they colonized a lot of countries. However, one day one of those countries decided to rise up and they killed off all of the gods, which sends the geopolitical world in total upheaval. This country that was once so powerful, the continent as it's called, basically collapsed as all of the miracles that held up their infrastructure, all their technology collapsed along with the death of all of these divinities. This novel, we follow our main character, who's actually a spy, and she's infiltrating this continent to try to track down any last remaining traces of the divine. This is a novel that just feels so unique because I feel like it combines so many elements of modern diplomacy or geopolitical conflict and puts it in a supernatural or a fantastical setting with gods at play. It's just so wild. Also the mystery that propels the story forward and all the characters trying to unlock and uncover what's going on. It just feels like you're reading a modern day military thriller, but it's a fantasy novel. I don't know. I loved this book so much. It was super refreshing, and I loved the elements of gods and the miracles and them collapsing. I really loved this first book. I immediately jumped into the second book for my commute, but I would give this first one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. From there, I picked up Keeper of the Lost City's Nightfall. This is book 6 to the Keeper of the Lost City series, a series that I have literally not shut up about since I started reading it. I love this middle grade series so much. There's so many elements to it that I think are just perfect and wholesome and lovable, but this is a story that's set in this elven world. Our main character, Sophie, is quite exceptional. She's raised as a human, but she has telekinetic and telepathic abilities, and she has a photographic memory, and in the first one she discovers she's actually an elf. She's whisked away to a whole new world. She goes to school, she meets friends, So many things about this story I love. The mystery is great, but also, and most importantly, there is the biggest cast of characters, honestly, that I've encountered in a long time. You love them all. Like, everyone has an interesting plot or like story arc and development. I just love that there's so much like growth and learning happening all of the time. Also, all of the friendships that occur in this and all the cute little romances are adorable, and I love every second of it. And I also feel like it has so many positive relationships to read, which I think is really important in middle grade. There's positive parental relationships and other like trustworthy adult relationships that I think is important, but this series also delves into some darker topics like mourning and grief and asking for help and being scared and stuff like that. Of course, at its heart, it has a wonderful, fantastical plot that I love, and I really loved this 6th novel so much. I flew through it despite it being over 700 pages long, so I'm really sad I only have one book left until I'm totally caught up, but I'm so happy I've started to read this series late last year and into this year because it has been such a lovely time. So I think I gave this 6th one like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was really lovely, and of course, I'm obsessed with this series. There, I picked up Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. This was such a, I don't want to say surprise, but this is a great new YA fantasy release. My friend Monica ultimately propelled me to pick this up because she described it having really great elements of like anime or K-drama, which I 100% stand behind. But this is a story that's set in modern day Seoul, and we follow 2 main characters. One is a mythical character from Korean folklore, and she's basically this like half fox, half human, and she can suck the energy, very much like a vampire, out of humans to survive, and she has to do it to survive. Her whole life she's been raised by her mother to basically distrust, not really make any connections with humans because they'll just betray them, and also because they have to kind of like feed off of humans. It's a complicated relationship. And our other main character is a boy who has a complicated family life, but he's just a normal guy who goes to high school. He doesn't really take anything too seriously. And of course, these 2 characters meet and all sorts of things happen from there. So many things about this book I enjoyed. One, I would 100% agree that it has some K-drama anime influence. It's super dramatic, and there are a lot of tropes that kind of exist in this book that might otherwise really annoy me in other contexts, but it just works so well. There are so many dramatic moments, but it doesn't feel cheesy. It feels entertaining. It just fits right into how the story is structured and told. 2, I love the fantasy elements. I thought the Korean folklore was so well integrated in the story. Korean fantastical elements, food, language, everything is like put into this novel full force, which I loved. To me, I haven't really read anything inspired by Korean folklore at all. I just felt like it was so richly done. It wasn't just like mentioned and then breezed along. It was ultimately at the very heart of the story. I also really enjoyed the dynamic of the girl kind of being the bad one. She's sort of the vampire, the Edward Cullen in this situation, and the boy kind of falling for her and trying to like be a part of her life. I really liked that kind of switch on that normal trope that we see within YA, so I thought that was really entertaining, but I really liked this book a lot. I flew through it, I read it in like 2 days, and I don't know, I had a great time reading this, so I was pleasantly surprised by this. 100% recommend if you're looking for a quick, easy, really entertaining read with lots of great story elements. So I would give this book about a 4 out of 5 stars as well. So good, I can't wait for the next book in this series. From there, I picked up Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. This is obviously a reread for me, but I am trying to read the first 3 books before the 4th book, Goblet of Fire, comes out in the illustrated edition in early October. I am flying through this reread. I want it to last forever, but obviously I love Harry Potter. I obviously love the Sorcerer's Stone. These illustrated editions are incredible. I've had people ask if they're like abridged, but no, it's the full story with just added beautiful full color illustrations throughout it. I honestly think these books are amazing. I can't wait to have them forever. I can't wait to read them to my children one day. I don't know. I just love rereading Harry Potter so much. I always find that I find something new when I pick these books up. Like I notice something a little different, or I don't know, things just come back to me in different ways. It's great. I always find a reread rewarding, so I read this, loved it, obviously. And the last book I completed this month was Miss Everything by Jennifer Weiner. This was a really amazing novel and one that I picked up for the Barnes & Noble Book Club. Someone requested that I start reviewing those books in my wrap-up on my Instagram, so here I am. I don't know why I did before, but hey, let's start. This is a story of two sisters, and we basically follow their lives over 6 decades of time and through American history with lots of tumultuous change through those 6 decades. We follow Jo and Bethy, who are raised in a very traditional setting in 1950s Detroit, and basically both sisters have sort of stereotypes and expectations placed on them. Jo is the tomboy, very quiet but very book smart, and is kind of expected to pursue that with like fervor. And then we also follow Bethy, who is the more traditionally feminine, really pretty girl, and obviously is kind of expected to take on that mantle of the traditional housewife role. However, both women, as they kind of grow up and go through their adolescence, through early adulthood, take very different paths than what they're expected. Kind of setting in the backdrop of the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, Bethy kind of becomes a very adventurous, free spirit woman and begins to take unexpected choices than what necessarily was initially put on her. And Jo surprisingly becomes the much more traditional role within the family. She gets married, moves to Connecticut, becomes a mother, and becomes more of a witness to the changing world versus an active participant. This is a story that I feel like touches on so many different things, and I personally really loved how it was told. First, we follow a sister relationship that is incredibly complicated and we watch unfold through a very long period of time. And ultimately, the idea here is that both women kind of have to confront their lives and their choices and kind of why they're making the decisions they're making, reflect back on their life, and perhaps realize that even with all the decisions they made, they might not really be in the place that makes them the most happy. And also confronting the question of, is it too late to change your life? Like, you've spent all this time making these decisions to get you to one point, point A. Can you change everything you've done to go to point B if you think that will make you happier? Again, I loved the sisterly relationship within this. It also has some really interesting family dynamics, the desire to be accepted and loved. More largely, I really feel like this book tries to discuss and talk about like a woman's place in this world, especially against the backdrop of a very changing American history. I definitely recommend this book if you haven't read it already. And the last 2 books I'm going to talk about are the 2 books I am currently reading but have not finished yet in the month of July. The first one is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I immediately picked up the second book once I finished The Sorcerer's Stone. Will 100% finish this in August, probably very quickly. Obviously loving my time reading this book. It's incredible. And then I'm also reading City of Blades by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is the sequel to City of Stairs. I only have like 100 pages of this book left. Again, we'll finish it very quickly in the early parts of the month, and we'll immediately jump into the third book. So cool. Again, the geopolitical politics, it's just wild, but there's like magic. It's just so good. So these are 2 books that I really almost finished this month, but didn't quite get to, and we'll finish hopefully very early in August. Alrighty guys, those are all of the books I read in the month of July. Let me know down below some books you've read recently, as I would love to know, and I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye.